Hello again, everyone. So today we are at part 3, the third session of a series I'm doing on how to choose the right interior resources for our interior journey, or how to choose the right resources for our interior journey. Okay, so this is a 5-part series leading up at the very end to where my particular offer, Clarity, fits in. But even if you're not considering my Clarity Interior Journey, which is my signature offer of a coaching journey, even if you're not considering that, this series, especially the first 4 parts of the series, is going to be very helpful for you just to learn to be more strategic and intentional about your interior journey. So for the first couple of sessions, I spoke about kind of like the introductory stuff and common mistakes that people make when they're trying to make the interior journey. Mistakes that make it that much harder for them to make progress in the interior journey. And then in session 2, I started off by talking about how do we learn to make space for the interior journey, something that many people overlook. Okay, why it is important to actually even create space for the interior journey, that making space for the interior journey is part of a way of life that every interior pilgrim will need to learn how to do. And we closed off that session by going through a praxis exercise. I offered you some criteria that will be helpful in discerning what you can maybe take off your plate, how you can maybe go about creating more space in your life for the interior journey. So today we're going to be doing another very practical session, and it's about how will you be able to tell if a resource, okay, so any resource or activity or program, for example, how would you be able to tell if this is actually going to be helpful for your interior journey? So the emphasis here is in the word interior, because clearly our life is made out of more than just the interior journey, right? So I'm going to share a bit about why it is that the interior journey matters in the larger picture, just briefly, because you already know if you're following my account, I'm just really focusing on the interior journey, right? So, but what's the distinction? What's the difference between the interior dimension of a journey and the rest of our life? And how can we tell if some resource we're looking at or activity that we're doing is actually helping us build the interior journey? Now, that's an important question, because if not, we may be packed with a lot of good activities and resources that could be very formative in general, formative for different dimensions of our lives, but they may not be contributing to helping us grow the interior journey. Now, that's going to be very sad if you want to grow your interior journey and you're actually not availing yourself to the right resources that help the interior dimension of your journey, right? So that's what we will be looking at. Here's the first slide for today. So for today's session, we're going to look at how we can tell if that resource, whether it's a program, formation, or activity, is actually helpful for our interior journey. We're going to look at what the criteria we can use to discern this. Okay, and so I always look at the general principles of something. And if we know how to apply the general principles, you can use it almost on anything and find an answer as to whether it's going to be helpful or not. And we're going to end today's session with a very practical praxis exercise that you can use to look at everything that's on your plate right now, or anything that you're planning to embark on. You use this praxis exercise and you'll be able to have a much better sense of whether it actually helps your interior journey or not. Okay, so if you are just jumping in on this session, on this video, maybe catching it on replay or hearing it on a podcast without having heard the first 2 parts, I just want to encourage you to start from the beginning, because as with every series, these parts are not distinct. They build on the sessions that come before them. So for you to really get the most out of today's session, you'll need to listen to the first part and the second part. Okay. All right. So let's get on. So just to revisit, the integrated interior journey, the way I define it, right? The most important part, or the part that we begin with, is that we want to know with greater clarity who we are, right? So who I am, who you are, you'll be asking yourself, who am I? And how to live, choose, and respond from that you authentically, unapologetically, so without being ashamed of who you are, right? With integrity, confidence, and compassion. Compassion to yourself and compassion to others. So the purpose of, or the point of making the interior journey in the integrated sense is this. Now, to be able to understand a little bit more about what makes up this interior journey or where it actually happens, I want to show you this little diagram. Okay, so you can see that there's a little figure, that's you or that's me, all right? And surrounding this figure, this person, is their reality, right? So that there's stuff that's going on outside of them, outside of me. So what's outside of me would be the circumstances that I find myself in, what is happening in the world, what's happening in my family, at work, everything that impacts me, that is outside of me. It includes my environment, it includes the events that I participate in, it includes the people in my life. All that is outside of me. And then the next layer is what's inside of me, my thoughts, my emotions, my feelings, right? My consciousness, my body, my nervous system, all that is stuff happening within me that I experience. But at the very heart of me is what I call my inner core, right? The core of me. The core of me is distinct from what I experience. It is distinct from what's happening outside of me or my interactions with other people. At the core of me is my identity, my inner self. It's a very intimate part of me. And within my core, also are the beliefs that I have about myself, right? So, by the way, this is actually covered. I introduced this concept in episode 4 of my podcast when I talk about living from the inside out. Okay, so you can revisit that if you're not familiar with this concept of the different layers of life. So there are 3 layers of life. Okay, with this in this model, this paradigm that I'm proposing for just kind of like for us to be able to have an easier way of locating if something is helping me in my interior life. So at the most external side, at the outermost layer of my life would be where I am and include things that I do, okay? The next layer, what I mentioned already, is what is inside of me, my thoughts, my emotions, and my physical sensations, etc. These include or this kind of like talk about how I am, not so much where I am or what I do, but how I am, right? My subjective experiences. And then again, at the innermost core, it is who I am. So not just where I am, what I do, or how I am, but who I am. And that's my innermost self. Now, this core is very, very important for us to understand a little bit more about the deepest part of ourselves, the inner core, my core, right? Because the core is where we are all wounded. When we talk about trauma, when we talk about, any kind of brokenness and fragmentation because of the experiences that we've had in our life, it is not just that our feelings are hurt. It's not just that, our body has physiological reactions because of the stress. It is that at the deepest part of us, there is a wound that happens. It affects how we see ourselves. It affects, in a very existential sense, our sense of worthiness, of whether we deserve to be alive or belong in this world. Okay, so it is at the level of the core, this innermost part of ourselves, that we are attacked by identity lies, right? Identity lies such as I'm not good enough, I am stupid, or I'm so clumsy, I'm useless, I can't do anything well enough. All those lies, or that I'm not caring. Things that are half-truths about us that handicap us from being able to love ourselves, from being able to show up, confidently as ourselves in the world. This all happens in our core. And so this is where we form the beliefs and vows that we make about ourselves and how we will lead our life. Often, this is in the form of, let's say, trauma responses, or, for example, if maybe you grew up in a very broken family, or you saw how difficult a marriage can be, and you're really hurt, maybe in an abusive marriage, not just yours, let's say your parents, for example, you might make a vow like, I would never get married. I will never trust my heart to another person at that high degree of commitment to get married, because I see how hurt you can. So I will never do that. So that's kind of like an example of a vow, right? Or sometimes a vow may take the form of, I will never be like so-and-so, like my parent, because you see how hurtful it is. And initially you may think, well, why is that a bad thing? I'm saying I don't want to be like my parent because I don't want to have that bad negative trait that hurts people, right? But when we make vows, any vows, they're very restrictive, and it ends up being like the only thing we can kind of like see, and we cannot become into the fullness of ourselves. We are always dancing around just that vow, and we become very constricted and restricted. Okay, so that's the opposite of becoming more fully alive and more fully human. The core is the foundation of all relationship that we have with others, with God, with ourselves. The core is, in terms of, spiritual and religiously speaking, also where we believe God dwells in us, where Christ dwells in us. He, at the very deepest existential part of us. The core is not usually consciously thought about. Like, we don't usually think about it very much, but our core really influences our thoughts, our actions, our behaviors in a way that we may not be even aware of, right? So the scripts that we have, the beliefs that we have about ourselves, the coping mechanisms, so therefore the life scripts that we have, they all develop in and around our core, all right? And that's what affect our feelings, our emotions, how we see the world, and it definitely impacts how we show up in the world at the outermost layer of our lives. So for any resource, when we're looking at whether a resource is helpful for our interior journey, for a resource to help with our interior journey, it must help us connect with, engage, heal, and integrate our core, right? So I repeat that. For a resource to help us with our interior journey, it must help us connect with, engage, heal, and integrate our core. So it must reach our core, the very deepest part of us. All right. That resource, whatever resource it is, must be able to help us to descend through. So earlier I showed the 3 layers. You will see that diagram again. The resource must be able to help us descend from the outermost layer through our inner layer of our thoughts, our emotions, and our feelings, right? How I am, and reach our core, and then help lead us back out through the layers so that we show up in the outermost layer of our lives, like with other people, in situations, events, differently, in a way that's living from the inside out. So if a resource can help us do this, then it can help our interior journey. Okay, so I'm going to be going through some examples later, so it's not just conceptual. We're going to see examples of how some resources will fit this criteria and how other resources that may be helpful for other things do not fit this criteria. So again, this is the 3 layers of life, right? The layers of life. The outermost layer, just remember everything that's outside of you, anything that helps you in your relationship with other people, with work, with ministry, with service, all that is outside of you. That's the outermost layer. Then the inner layer, right, where we experience our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and the innermost core. So bear in mind these 3 layers. Okay, these are actually, this diagram is taken from A Leader's Spirituality, which is an online course that I teach for the Catholic Leadership Center in Singapore. It's a fully online course. So if you're interested in going through what I'm sharing here, particularly the layers of life and how praying through the layers of life looks like and all that, you might want to check out that course. I'm not going to go too much into all those other applications in this session. We're just going to be talking about the layers in the context of how to identify what resources can help us make the interior journey. Okay. So I'm going to share with you questions to ask about any resource, okay, to see if it's likely to be helpful or not helpful for the interior journey. Okay, so specifically the interior journey. So the first question you can ask is, does the resource help me to become more fully present to myself and or to God? When we talk about the interior journey, we're focusing more on the so the interior dimension, right, which is my relationship with myself and with God, because my relationship with other people is not on the interior, it's on the external layer, right? It's exterior. It's informed and impacted and definitely heavily influenced by my interior state. But when we talk about the interior journey, relationship-wise, we're talking about self and God. Okay, so is the resource I'm looking at helping me to be more fully present to myself and or to God? Okay, some resources may be focusing more on God. Some resources may be focusing more on myself, but does it help me to be present? When I say present, I mean like fully present to my body, fully present to my emotions, being able to remain with myself or with God, as opposed to being, I can be very engaged, but I am not really present to how I am or how I'm feeling. Then it wouldn't be a yes in this case, okay, to this question. Does the resource help me to be with my emotions and feelings with less anxiety, less judgment, less analysis? So this is another way of asking, like, can this resource help me to grow my capacity to dwell with myself, to be with myself, and then to let myself encounter God within myself? There can be a lot of resources that form our intellects, our minds, but allow us to escape being present to our emotions, allow us to escape being attentive to how we're actually feeling, what our deeper needs are. Those resources then would not be helpful in helping me be with my emotions and feelings with less judgment, with less anxiety, with less analysis. Does this resource, does it help me to slow down, to practice the pause in my life, to quieten down my noisy mind, my thoughts, and my compulsion to act and to perform and to achieve? Because often the way we show up in the world, which is at the outermost layer, is very affected by our brokenness and our fragmentation, right? So we often live by our programming, our life scripts, and they're often scripts that help us to act or perform or achieve as a way to remain safe, right? Try to remain safe in the world. And when we are acting out of our trauma responses and coping mechanisms, they're almost never slow, because the whole point is to escape the pain of our consciousness. So we don't want to be present to ourselves, right? So resources that are helpful for our interior journey has to help us go beneath or deeper than our coping mechanisms, our scripts to achieve and perform. They have to help us to slow down, right? So if the resources are able to guide us and facilitate us to be able to slow down and pause and quieten down our thoughts to be with ourselves, then that will be helpful for our interior journey. Does this resource, whatever resource we're looking at, does it help me to become more self-aware, more honest, more courageous about the truth of myself and my reality? Again, does the resource help me to become more self-aware? Think about how often maybe you go for some kind of formation and you can find it very intellectually stimulating. You may even find it moving emotionally, but you end up maybe thinking about how it applies to other people, right? And or it gives you something else to hold on to feel better about yourself, without helping you to be more courageous and be more grounded, to take a more honest look at yourself. If there are plenty of resources out there that are helpful, like I said, for different kinds of things, like to have to develop skills, people skills, listening skills, all that. But if those resources do not have a component that help us to be more self-aware, to be more honest and courageous about facing our own truth, then those resources, no matter how good they are not helpful for the interior journey. Okay, so I'm hoping that you're beginning to pick up on the nuance of what I mean by what's helpful for the interior journey. Another question you could ask is, does the resource, is it something that can help me calm my mind, my heart, my nervous system? Does it help me to accept my limitations? See, all this is very important when we're talking about integrating and healing our core identity of who I am, right? Of coming to accept myself, to love myself. Because there's so much unrest and there's so much discomfort there for those of us who are very fragmented, who are trauma survivors, complex trauma survivors. Often we need to look for resources that can be a gateway for us to be with ourselves. And that includes helping us to regulate our emotions, for example, and also to accept our limitations. So if certain resources you find only trigger your need to perform, okay, like only, I say only because I think depending on our wounds, many things could potentially trigger us to want to perform, but doesn't also give us the dimension of helping us to be still within ourselves and regulate and accept our limitations, then is limited in its helpfulness to the interior journey, okay? And finally, in terms of the questions I'm sharing today for what you can ask about resources is, does this resource help me to grow in intimacy and attunement with myself or with God? Okay, so intimacy and attunement, which includes being present, accepting, and loving ourselves. It's hard, right? I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, this is the whole thing. It's very difficult for many of us. So precisely, resources that will help our interior journey are resources that will help us to develop the intimacy with ourselves and with God. Okay? So anything that we go through, no matter what kind of resource, we're talking about program or one-on-one sessions or retreats or no, because there are many different kinds, right? These are just general terms. If we find that the deepest we go is reflection at an intellectual level, and it can feel very exciting. So many people I know, including myself, can fall very much in love with reflecting on things on an intellectual level. You know, we can have analysis, we can have insights, very exciting intellectual insights about things. But if it doesn't penetrate to the deeper level of our emotions and help us connect with our body and be aware of all that and touch our inner core at the deepest level, then even those reflection exercises are not sufficient to help us with interior journey. Okay, so it's easy to assume that if something has a component of reflection, if something has a component of reflection and sharing, then that goes deeper and will touch the interior journey. Not necessarily. So this is an important criteria to bear in mind right here. Whether or not the reflection and the engagement is just at the intellectual level, or if it goes deeper, incorporates our emotion, our body, and reaches our inner core. Okay? So you've got to ask also when you're looking at resources, because we're not just looking at one resource throughout our life or even in any season, you can begin to think of things as, how do I curate what's in my life right now in this season? Maybe I have 2 or 3 different things going on. How do they come together to help me in praxis? Okay, how do these resources contribute to praxis of the healing of my core? Because if it's not going to help me heal my core, it's not going to help my interior journey, right? But any particular resource may focus on maybe one dimension, or maybe 2 of the healing of my inner core. So one way of looking at it, so I talk about praxis because sometimes some formation is just very intellectual. Like I said, then, it may fulfill the helping us learn some understanding. So for example, you listening to my session now, or whether it's on the, listening or watching this session, it's helping you with understanding. And understanding is really very important. But if it stops at understanding, like such conceptual understanding, it's not really deep knowing and it's not going to change your life. Okay. The other dimension here is contemplation, where you actually ponder, let things just sit, pray with it, bring it into prayer with the Lord. And by that, I mean more like contemplative prayer, heart prayer, what they call mental prayer, which isn't so much intellectual as it is affective prayer, right? And then there's also the element of practicing it, right? You have to work. You have to put it into practice. So where all 3 converge, this is praxis. And when we look at interior journey resources, or what resources will be helpful for our interior journey, it's helpful to see if they touch on all three, or if they're heavier on one, how we can complement it with other resources, that help us to bring all three dimensions of this into praxis, okay? Into praxis. Without using all these together, without that praxis, it's not going to change us. It's not going to actually have an impact in our life. Okay, so now we're going to move on to We're going to move on to examples, okay? I'm going to look at some examples as to common things that maybe we look at, resources that we look at, and look at how they may help our interior journey. So retreats in general are a resource that people often start looking at when they begin to take their interior journey seriously. But there are many different kinds of retreats. And now, of course, I'm not talking so much about like corporate retreats, right? Or there are wellness retreats that are not spiritual. Sometimes wellness retreats do help actually with our interior journey because it connects us with maybe the mind and body awareness and the connection. So in that dimension, it could help. All right. But there are also retreats, even spiritual retreats, that are maybe more input heavy, activity heavy, that are focused more on building community and fellowship, versus certain retreats that have more silence, more solitude, that is more catered for the individual. Right. Generally, I would say retreats that have more space for silence, more space for solitude, they would be more helpful for the interior journey, generally, right? Okay, just bear that in mind. Of course, different kinds of retreats can be helpful, but also depending on the stage of the journey you are at, you will find generally as you make this interior journey, the deeper you go, the more solitude and silence you will need, because you need more space to go deeper, to dwell and be with yourself, to wrestle with things within yourself or with God. And you'll find that you will seek out retreats, maybe that hardly have any input sessions, and just have a director, for example, that journeys with you one-on-one, right? Those are like live-in retreats, like you set aside maybe a weekend or a few days or maybe sometimes even up to, a month. There are 30-day retreats away. But there are also things like retreats in daily life. So I'll just give you two examples that are available in Singapore as well. One is, you see on the slide, WOGP stands for Week of Guided Prayer. So there are these prayer teams that are trained in guiding people. So they're called prayer guides, in guiding people to learn how to pray in the Ignatian contemplation. Okay, and so the format usually is that these prayer teams, they show up at a parish can invite them. And when there is a week of guided prayer, if you see it show up in your bulletin, usually it means that if you sign up for it on the Sunday, usually begins on a Sunday, there's a large group session for everybody that's signed up. They teach you the rubrics, the introduction to Ignatian contemplation. And then for the next 6 days, you journey one-on-one with a guide whom you meet for just about half an hour for 6 days, right? Or the next 5 days? No, the next 6 days. Yeah. So Monday to Saturday, usually you meet one-on-one with your guide for half an hour. Every day you're given, maybe a passage from the scripture, for example, to pray in the way that they've taught you. And the prayer guide meets you where you are. So it's very organic, like what happens the next day, what you're given to pray, what guidance you're offered, all depends on what came up in your own time of prayer, which you do outside of these meeting sessions, right? And then at the end of the week, which is a Saturday, I think, Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember right now, but basically you close off with another large group session. Okay, so it's actually meant to be like a taster of praying Ignatian contemplation. But personally, in my own journey, this was one of the big turning points in my life. The first time I went for a week of guided prayer, I actually crossed some kind of a milestone or breakthrough in my ability to pray effectively. Okay, and it was through one of these experiences. Another example of retreat in daily life. So there are many kinds you can actually find of different varying lengths. A lot of them are Ignatian in their spirituality. So, but from Saint Ignatius, the longest form perhaps among these would be what is called the 19th Annotation of the Spiritual Exercises of St. Ignatius. So there are two ways you can do this retreat. Those who go away, you actually go away and stay in a retreat center, for example, you can do this in 30 days, it's a month long. Okay, not exactly 30 days, plus minus. But for many lay people who have work and family commitments and can, get away for 30 full days, there is a version that you do it in daily life. So it's an extension of what I described earlier about a week of guided prayer, except that instead of a 1 week, you do this for like 9 months, 10 months. Okay, and you meet with a director, a spiritual director, every week for that 9 to 10 months, who guides you through 4 weeks, okay, in a sense, 4 sections of this exercise that was written more than 500 years ago. It's like a curriculum, it's a spiritual exercise curriculum that I also went through and experienced, and is very powerful if it's in the hands of if you're guided by a good spiritual director and you're ready for it, okay? Now, these retreats in daily life have a unique component to them that I personally find very different from retreats where you go away, okay? I mean, it's great to go away sometimes and just set aside time completely for silence and solitude. But how often do we find that after we return back to normal life, everything's the same? It's hard to incarnate and embody what we can do when we have kind of run away to the mountaintop, right? When we are down here in the valley again with everything that's going on in our lives. Retreats in daily life, especially something like the 19th Annotation, which takes about 9 to 10 months. If you're ready for that commitment, it is really life-changing, because you know what? Your life doesn't stop. Your life goes on. You're working, you have all your family stuff, all that happening while you're doing this retreat. So it's like the prayer and your life become so integrated. Your life, whatever happens in the day or the last day, goes into your prayer. And then from the prayer, you receive grace to bring into the next day, like the new day. I say new day because I did the daily prayer exercises for this, which requires about an hour every day in the morning, right? And lest you think that this is only for people who have a lot of time to do this, something like a retreat in daily life for 9 to 10 months. I went through this when I was in full-time pastoral ministry in the parish. It was one of the busiest times in my life. Okay, and my husband did his 19th Annotation in the midst of work as well. And he has a very, very heavy work schedule. So he would wake up, I think, at like 5 to do it. Now, I'm not kind of like talking ourselves up, okay? But what I'm trying to say is, when you are ready for something, when you want it enough, when you know this is what you want, you'd be surprised at what you could do, okay? Because before it was my time to do this, there's no way I would be that committed. And I surprised myself. I'm not really strong sometimes on long-term commitments, but I was able to do that, all right? So that's an example of a retreat in daily life that would help the interior journey, okay? You can look it up online, not just these, but just Google retreats in daily life, and you can find several types. Okay, other examples. Counseling and therapy, which I often talk about in my other lives and my podcasts, right? That's a very clear-cut example. Or a spiritual direction, right? They have different focus, but these are one-on-one sessions, individual sessions that can be very specific as to where you are, what you're wrestling with at any moment of your journey or any stage of your journey, right? And these, both spiritual direction and counseling or therapy, definitely help you to descend beyond just the external layer of what's happening in your life and look at your feelings, how your body is feeling and all that. It helps you to develop a capacity to be with yourself at the very least, right? And then often to ask, let's say, for example, in spiritual direction, to bring that further into prayer. What is actually happening within you? What is the Lord saying to you in that intimate place that is your inner core? All right. So that's how these things can help with the interior journey. Or learning spiritual practices like, a rule of life, or Ignatian examen and contemplation, Lectio or Visio Divina. These are prayer forms that if you practice regularly as part of a lifestyle of making the interior journey. They help you to be present to yourself. They help you to be present to God. They help you to pay attention to how you're feeling. Remember, it's not about thinking. None of these are heavy on just thinking. Okay, thought is important, but it's very much more about integrating your thought with your emotion, descending from the external circumstances of your life to your heart, to the seat of your being, to your inner core, right? Now, spending alone time in nature, you may think that's not a program. Yeah, it's not a program. It's not, it's so easy sometimes. But nature itself is so healing. And for many, many people, just going for a walk or a run, in a park or at the beach will already begin to help them unwind from the tangles of being involved in the external layer of the world, to be more present to how their body is feeling, to maybe how they're feeling emotionally. My husband, he always has these amazing insights after he goes for his runs, but the insights are not intellectual insights. The insights are the fruit of some knots being untied while he was running, because now during his runs, he has space to be with himself, to have some clarity, just for him to be. And especially if he's running outside, right, in nature, then it's even more impactful. So things like contemplative art or contemplative photography. For me, contemplative photography was one of was the prayer form that I leaned on a lot during my long season of healing, because there's something about beauty, right? There's something about beauty that's so healing, that regulates the nervous system, helps us regulate our emotions, that touches us in a place where we don't have words to express or understand how we're feeling. So all these things are so important. Nature, art, music, all that. It helps with our interior journey, especially in the areas where we just don't have words for it and we just don't have thought for it. Okay, so spiritual or effective journaling, which may or may not be with words. For some people who love words. For me, it's often words. I just pour my heart out in my journals. I write letters to myself and to God. But for some people, it is drawing. I have a friend of mine once where we went for a same retreat, and when we were sharing a big table, and I think I happened to look up and kind of just glanced over at her journal. I couldn't see what was really inside, but what I could tell, it was just beautiful drawings, very colorful, and hardly any words at all. Whereas if she looked over at mine, it's like the whole page was just words, right? And no art. So whatever it is that works for us, that connects us to the inner self, right? The core. Okay, so now I'm going to look at examples of resources that we also may find very common and we may have experience in, but they're not directed at the interior journey, okay? And this one, I'm going to take a little bit more time to show or kind of help you understand why it's not directed at the interior journey. So remember though, just because it's not directed at the interior journey doesn't mean that it's not useful, doesn't mean that it's not good. It is, because our life is more than just interior journey. But now what we're looking at is being able to tell the difference whether a resource is going to help us with our interior journey, okay? This interior integration and healing journey. So first off, head heavy, very intellectual, head heavy kinds of formation classes, which is very, very common and very popular where I am here in Singapore for people who want to, learn more about their faith, or they want to. So, so the thinking often goes, okay, I want to take my faith more seriously. Faith has something to do with maybe, God and me. And I go for faith formation classes. So whether it's catechesis, learning about theology or learning about scripture, and if the interior journey has something to do with faith, then surely these classes help me with my interior journey. So I'm here to say no, no, because if the sessions or the formations are just helping you stay in your head, and I'm not saying there's no value there, but remember, for the interior journey to happen, we need to descend to the heart, to the body, and to the core, into our core. So if these sessions, these resources do not give you space, does not facilitate you and guide you to connect with your emotions, your body, and your relationship with yourself and with God, then they can be excellent formation sessions for what they are, but they are not helpful for your interior journey. Okay, they're not helpful because they're not directed at the interior journey. If you now look at the diagram of the 3 layers, you'll see that heavy kind of like sessions would touch perhaps the thoughts. So it's in the inner layer there, the thoughts, right? But it doesn't engage necessary emotions or physical sensations. It definitely doesn't reach the level of the core of who you are. All right. Again, it may engage, what you understand. So in terms of not even just how you are, I think it's more, it contributes to maybe your understanding of things, which doesn't really help you to connect with what you're thinking in a way that's associated with how you show up and how you are. Okay, so that's why it's not about the interior journey. Okay, another resource would be, that's also quite common, pastoral formation. Okay, so one is understanding, right? If I go for sessions that are training my intellect or forming my intellect, now there's another kind of formation that forms me and trains me in skill, like listening skills, facilitation skills, leadership skills. And a lot of people who are active in the parish or perhaps want to serve will need to set aside time for this kind of formation sessions. And they are helpful for listening, facilitation, particularly, maybe leadership in terms of the skill dimension. These are formation that equip you for outward service. So remember again, the 3 layers of life. Outward service is on the outermost layer, right? But these sessions usually do not help you to connect with your own emotions and your core. Maybe some of them do. I would love if more of them actually do, right? But I think there's not really a general awareness yet of how important our interior life is vis-a-vis how it impacts the way we show up for service. So by and large, most of the sessions I have attended before, I know about, when you're talking about facilitation skills or listening skills, you can go through all that without much awareness or connection with your own self and your own core. Okay, so again, these resources could be helpful for other things, but they're not directed at the interior journey and they're not helpful for you in making your interior journey. Because this would be connected to the outer layer of what I do, right? Not so much even how I am and less of who I am. So another thing that may be on your plate in your life that could be very meaningful, but is not directed at your interior journey, would be volunteering in any form. You could be doing, really good things, volunteering to help the poor, migrant workers, all sorts of maybe charity work or ministry or mission. Just remember though, all those are concentrated on outward service. That's the outermost layer of your life. Ideally, they connect with and flow from who I am, but they don't help to form the integration and the healing of our inner core. Okay, so this it touches on where you are and what you do, your words and actions, how you can help others, right? But so many people can engage in all these things and not even be in touch with how they feel about it, how they are about it, how are they feeling their bodies or their emotions, whether they are doing all these things out of performance because they are living out their life scripts to show up and prove that they're worth something, or are these ways of service and mission really flowing from who they are, right? So those things are distinct from the interior life and are not focused at helping you form the interior life, all right? So another thing not directed at the interior journey that's also very common on our plates would be gatherings, activities, conversations that has a heavy focus on fellowship and community activity. Again, remember, when I say they're not directed in the interior journey, it's not that they have no value, but these things, they are again on the outer side, the outermost layer, okay? It deals with your relationships with people. You can attend a lot of these kinds of gatherings, community sessions, and be completely unself-aware about how you're feeling, how you're connected, especially if those spaces that you show up in are not safe for you to really show up as who you are. So one of the most important prerequisites for any of these resources to help you in your interior journey is that you must feel safe enough. By that, it means you must feel that you're unconditionally accepted as you are. That gives you the ability to show up as yourself. Okay, and then to grow in comfort in being yourself. if the places that you go to and you show up in, and generally when we're talking about just larger groups or more mixed kind of groups, we all tend to live more on the surface. Unless we're already very integrated, we all tend to live more on the surface. So that's not going to really help you form your interior journey. Again, being with other people, you'll be focusing on where you are, what you do, maybe some awareness of how you are, but rarely, or almost never would it connect you with who you are. Okay? Of course, at higher levels of integration, when you've already made the journey for a long time, all these 3 layers, they're always kind of like joined together, flowing in and out. All right? But now we are operating on the assumption of that we need help, that our core is still fragmented, wounded. So when we want to focus on growing our interior journey to help us become more healed and more integrated, we need to look at what's taking up all our time and our energy. And if all the resources that we think are helping us, or all the activities we're investing our time and energy in, have nothing to do with helping us grow our interior life, then we have to relook at what's on our plate. Because remember, like what I talked about in session 2, you need to make space for your interior journey. So if there's no space because everything in your life right now, however good and meaningful they may be, are engaging you just on the outermost layer of your life, or maybe in your inner layer, and not helping you to engage and heal and integrate your core, you might need to make some, deeper and more important discernment and changes in order for you to actually make the interior journey. All right. Okay, so now the next 2 things I'm talking about is not that they're not directed at the interior journey, but this is just not helpful to the interior journey. Okay. And what's the difference? So any program, that require energy, capacity, and presence that you currently do not have, even if these resources are directed to help your interior life. So I'm talking about, for example, let's say, retreats or a longer program. So, kind of a thing that help you to be more aware of yourself and all that. But if right now you're going through some crisis, you're trying to sort out a lot of things, you have family obligations that are really very urgent and important, maybe someone is really sick, or your work season currently is just too crazy, you have to find resources that are not going to require that much commitment as when that you're ready to give. Okay, so this is a judgment call. Sometimes it's a bit of trial and error, but I'm just saying that if you bite off more than you can chew, or if you try and take on something without having learned how to create space for it, then no matter how good that resource is, it's not going to be helpful for you, in your interior journey. And the next thing would be any program or any resource, any resource, not just a program, any resource that does not meet you at your growing edge, meaning that's where you are at, where you are growing, for healing and integration will not be helpful to you. Meaning if this is too basic for you, you've already laid the foundations, you need to be able to move on to something deeper so that you can keep growing. Or you are trying out a resource that is too advanced for you, you haven't laid the foundations necessary to really benefit from that, then they're not going to be very helpful for your interior journey, even if these are resources directed at the interior journey. All right. So that's something that you don't often hear explained to you. No one actually explained it to me before. It's different things that I picked up, right? And then I realized this is true, and it really does apply, I think, for any kind of learning, any kind of growth. Okay, so now we're gonna be at the last part of the session. I'm going to share with you a practice exercise. All right, and if you can watch this on replay, or if you're listening to this when it's out on my podcast, you can check out the video that's linked to it for the slides so that you can see the questions. Okay, you can use this exercise anytime you want to discern whether what you're filling up your plate with is helpful for your interior life or not, for your interior journey or not. So the practice exercise for you to put into practice what you've been hearing me talk about is discern if the resources in your life right now, or what you maybe plan to embark on in the near future, is actually helpful to your interior life. Okay, so you've heard me explain the 3 layers of our life. You've heard me explain how you can tell whether a resource is helpful to your interior life or not. Now you're gonna have to apply it to your particular life. You're gonna look at what's actually on your plate in your life and see how helpful they are for your interior journey. All right. So ask. So now I'm going to give you a series of questions that you ask. You take one thing that's on your plate and then you go through all these questions and see how many yeses or how many no's you answer for that particular resource that you have in mind or that particular commitment or activity that you have. Okay. So the first question, does the resource bring you through the layers of your life from outer to inner into your core and help you be present to yourself and God there in your core? Okay, does the resource that you're considering now bring you from the outermost layer of your life to the inner layer into your core and help you to be present to yourself and to God there? Does the resource help me to become more fully present to myself and to God? Okay, sorry, that's a bit of a repetition. Does it help me to be with my emotions and feelings with less anxiety and judgment and analysis? So does it help me to be with my own emotions and feelings with less anxiety, less judgment, and less analysis? Okay, yes or no? Whatever this resource is I'm looking at, right? I'm considering now. Does this resource help to slow me down, to pause and quieten down my mind, my thoughts? Help me to quieten down from my compulsion to always perform and achieve? Yes or no? Right? If it's not a yes, it's a no. Okay, just put it that way. If it's neutral, it's no. We're just looking at, does it hit this mark? Is it a yes? Next, does this resource help me to become more self-aware, more honest, and courageous about the truth of myself and my reality? So does this resource actually help me become more self-aware, more honest, and courageous about the truth of myself and my reality? Yes or no? Does this resource help to calm my mind, my heart, my nervous system, help me to accept my limitations? And does the resource help me to grow in intimacy with myself and with God? Okay, or you could say with myself or with God. Okay, as long as there's an either, if it helps you grow in intimacy and attunement with yourself or God, you can answer yes for this question for your resource. And as we come to the end of these questions, do you have the energy, the capacity, and the presence required for this resource to be effective in your life in this particular season? Okay, so now we're going to look at relative to your capacity now. Do you have that energy and capacity and presence for whatever you're doing or you're availing yourself, what resource you're using to actually be effective in your life? Or are you just hanging on to it because you've committed to it, And does this resource meet you at your growing edge where you are at for healing and integration? Or is it maybe too basic or too advanced for you? Okay, so does this resource meet you at your growing edge? Yes or no? So look at the end of this, how many yeses you have. Oh, sorry, give me a moment. My dog is whining. Okay, I'm going to have to carry Miko for a bit here. Yeah. Okay, so how many yeses did you answer for that resource that you were looking at, okay, for the earlier questions? The more you answer yes to those questions I had asked earlier, the more helpful that particular resource will be for your interior journey. The more helpful the resource will be in helping your interior journey, right, at this point in time. On the other hand, if it is like half no, half yes, it might not be the most effective resource for you for your interior journey, right? And clearly, if it's mostly no, it's not helpful at all for your interior journey. And that will give you some helpful criteria when you're looking at your life and what you want to put on your plate, especially if you really want to invest in your interior journey. You want to take it seriously. You wish to grow in your interior journey. I hope that this praxis exercise helps you in, everyone, our time and our energy is precious. We are all busy people. We're all very limited. It's going to help if we are clearer about what the season is in our life and, whether what we're doing is actually meeting the goal or the need that we want it to meet right? So if we want to grow in our interior journey, we need resources that will actually help in the interior journey. So I hope that's helpful. You'll find when you go through this exercise that you'll find, in fact, I bet that most of you will find that the many things that are on your plate that are very good things are actually not helpful with your interior journey. Like I said earlier, they could be helpful for other things, but they're not helpful for your interior journey. So do remember to submit whatever you have on your plate to, submit it all for discernment, okay? So that's the end of today's session. I hope that it has been helpful to you. So as I mentioned earlier, each of these sessions build on the previous one. If you go through all these sessions and you do the practice, you're gonna definitely make headway in clarity in what you need to do for your interior journey. Okay, I wouldn't say absolute clarity, but it's gonna help a lot. So the next part, when I go live again, I'll be looking at what are some categories and modalities of interior journey resources, and how do they fit with the stages of our interior journey? All right, so that's another thing to look at. So today, I'm giving you a criteria how to even look at whether something is going to help the interior journey, whether it's targeted at the interior journey. But amidst all that, right? So next session, we're gonna look at resources that are generally all meant to grow the interior life, but there are different categories, there are different modalities, and they may work for different stages of the journey. So that's what I'm going to be sharing next. All right. So thank you so much for watching and listening. And as usual, if you have any questions about what you heard today, feel free to drop me a direct message. And if I can, I will respond to it in the next live or respond to you some way or the other. Okay? Bye.